Recently, I've been having a lot of fun terrorising innocent teenagers at a rundown summer camp. Oh, and I've also been playing a load of Friday the 13th the game on the PlayStation 4. Now, obviously, Friday the 13th the game isn't the first Friday the 13th game ever made. The NES version of Friday the 13th is quite famous and a bit of a cult classic now, thanks mainly to an appearance on an episode of The Angry Video Game Nerd over 10 years ago. Wait, 10 years ago? Fucking hell. But what you might not know, unless you're old like me, is that 4 years before that came out, Domark Software released the very first Friday the 13th game on the Spectrum, Amstrad and Commodore 64. This here is the original ZX Spectrum version of Friday the 13th. It was actually re-released on a different label about a year or so later, but this Domark clamshell version is the one you want to get if you're a collector, mainly because it comes with this awesome blood red cassette tape. Now, while that's loading, let me read you an excerpt from the back of the box. It says here, "Read this first. Before playing the game, make sure that you 1. Close and lock all doors, windows and curtains. 2. Turn off all lights. Use a candle if necessary. 3. Make sure Granny isn't in the room." Okay. And 4. Set the computer volume at maximum. Then load and play the game. You will be surprised. And what's the surprise, you may be wondering? Well, wait for it. Yep, a blood-curdling digitised scream that plays after the first half of the game has loaded. That's hardly shocking nowadays, of course, but I'm sure it would have caused quite a few pairs of brown trousers back in the innocent 80s. Gameplay-wise, Friday the 13th, if you haven't guessed already, is pretty terrible. At the start of the game, the player is assigned as one of 5 campers and is then plonked down in a random location at Camp Crystal Lake Holiday Camp. What follows is a plodding game of deduction as you try to guess which one of your fellow campers is actually Jason in disguise. That's right, in an extreme case of false advertising, the only time we actually get to see Jason's mask is on the box and on the game's loading screen. What a scam. As the game plays out, you'll see little images of your fellow campers slowly turn into tombstones. This signifies that Jason has done them in, which will reduce your total score and increase your overall panic level. Jason, the king of terror that he is, will make a beeline for the most terrified campers first, so you better take him out before 1. He kills too many of your mates, and 2. He decides to turn his attention to you. Now, if you think all that looks and sounds a little bit dull, you'd be 100% correct. It is, but it's not until you try out the combat that you fully begin to understand just how much of a Nightmare on Elm Street Friday the 13th actually is. There are plenty of weapons randomly placed around each level, from rolling pins and knives to axes and chainsaws. Pick up one of those and a few bops to Jason's head should do him in, except it's not as easy as that because for some unknown reason your character can only attack to the right no matter what direction you're moving, and because the graphics are so basic there's no way to know if you're actually landing any blows at all. It's all incredibly frustrating and it had me raging at the TV for the first 20 minutes or so until I realised that it's much easier just to kite Jason along to the left and hit him every so often rather than just trying to batter him senseless at close range. So, what's your reward for killing Jason then? A lovely end screen? A nice little tune maybe? Perhaps a new location to play in? Nope, none of the above. You're just assigned a new camper to play as and the game starts all over again. Repeating this way, I assume, until the end of time. In the end, I got so sick of hunting for Jason, I just decided to murder my fellow campers instead. Turns out that's much more fun. They should have made that the game, to be fair. Commodore 64 and Amstrad owners had a much better time with their version of the game though. Not only did they have better graphics and gameplay, but they also had an actual musical soundtrack, rather than just a few tepid bleeps. Strangely though, one of the tunes included in the Amstrad version was Old MacDonald. Hardly the most appropriate music for a survival horror game. Both the C64 and Amstrad versions are much more colourful than their specky cousin, and the character models are a lot more detailed. Jason is also easier to spot because when he drops his disguise, he appears dressed head to toe in black clothing, although there's still no sign of his signature mask. Oh, and most importantly, in both of these versions, the player character can attack both to the right and the left. I have no idea why your attacks are fixed to one direction in the Spectrum version. I can only assume it's a really big bug that was missed and made its way onto the master tape and then out onto the final retail copies. Another thing these versions of Friday the 13th have over the Spectrum is the inclusion of something called horrors, which are basically the earliest form of video game jump scares. Walk into a room in either the C64 or Amstrad version and you'll occasionally get startled by one of two horrors, accompanied by a blood-curdling scream. The horrors take the form of either a cluster of bloodied skulls or an unfortunate chap with a machete buried in his melon. Oof, haunting. So yeah, sad but true, the Spectrum version is undeniably the worst version of Friday the 13th there is. But that's not the end of the story, because Domark did some pretty interesting things to try to convince people to buy the game, things that a modern audience might find rather strange. Firstly, every copy of Domark's Friday the 13th came with two of these. They're joke foaming blood capsules which, according to the packaging, you had to place in the mouth and chew until your saliva went red. Now, my second-hand copy of Friday the 13th didn't come with the capsules, but to be honest, that's a blessing in disguise because I'm not sure I'd be up for putting a 32-year-old practical joke in my mouth. Well, not when I'm sober, at least. Luckily for everyone watching, though, I bought what I presume are basically the same things off of eBay, so I can do a lovely recreation of an authentic 1980s Friday the 13th experience for your amusement. Alright, I'm not actually sure whether to put one or two of these in my mouth, but fuck it, let's do all three. Oh, it tastes horrible. The plastic's grim. I presume I'm not supposed to swallow this. Oh god, it's salty. I'm kind of foaming. Do I look horrific? This is the worst thing I've ever done. Ugh, that was unpleasant. Anyway, the other thing Domark did to entice buyers was to include a competition to win one of 5 Eureka colour monitors. All you had to do was identify 10 of the noises you heard whilst on holiday at Crystal Lake. So, where are these noises? Well, they're hidden at the end of the tape. They play once the game is loaded, and it's quite something to listen to. I won't play the whole thing because the tape quality is pretty crappy, but here's a few excerpts along with some handy subtitles that should help you understand what the fella from the past is saying.
Welcome to the Friday the 13th Horror Sound Effect Competition. You can win the Eureka monitor, which at the touch of a button will expand the playing area to fill the whole screen. Are you ready? Here's well, it's almost the end. And this is number 9. Number 9. Well, that's it. Simply write the number of the sound in the box on the inlay card against your chosen description. If you'd like a Domar sweatshirt for Christmas, then £8 with your name and address to us at Domar. Bye!
Incredible. Now, the entry form was actually folded away inside the front cover, but unfortunately, mine's kind of stuck together by what I can only hope is severe water damage, because if it's not, well, that is a lot of semen. Before I end this episode of Games You Never Knew Existed, I want to talk a little bit about the controversy surrounding the release and promotion of Friday the 13th on the Spectrum. It's quite fascinating to see what got people wound up back in the days before games could pull off ultra-realistic and ultra-violent gameplay like this. Back in December of 1985, Crash, a UK magazine that covered ZX Spectrum games, ran a preview of Friday the 13th, along with an advert for the game which featured Jason's mask covered in blood. These probably got people a little bit wound up, but the thing that really pushed people over the edge was the cover image drawn by the legendary artist Oliver Frey. People were so offended by the image, they wrote into the magazine in their droves to moan about it, prompting Crash to dedicate a whole page of the magazine to the complaints. Here's a few excerpts.
I was disgusted at the horrific picture on the December issue of the publication. My younger brother, who receives your magazine monthly, is only 9, and I hardly think the covers are suitable for that age range and over. I think the pictures from the film inside were totally unnecessary and quite disturbing.
The cover to the December issue has transcended the bounds of good taste. The current spate of sick and horrific computer games is an unnecessary trend which I would have thought influential magazines such as yours would not promote to impressionable youngsters who are your main reader group. Where will it all end, one wonders? Computerized sex orgies for the under 15s? P.S. Even the Friday 13th ad is puke-making.
Having read several of my kids' Crash mags and taken the scissors to several of the worst pages, December's front cover and related internal themes have sunk to a new low. I'm getting fed up with macabre and evil undertones in much of the contents, and I will be forced to stop my son buying it if it doesn't improve.
Bet you're all dying to find out how bad that cover image was now, aren't you? Well, get ready for a shock, because in the words of Digital Foundry's Rich Ledbetter, this, my friends, is hardcore. Yep, that's it. This is what all the fuss was about. Pretty tame by today's standards, eh? I wonder how the people who wrote those letters would react if they saw the modern version of Friday the 13th, the game. I'm gonna guess probably a little bit like this. So there you go, that's the Friday the 13th game you never knew existed. Sure, it's pretty underwhelming, even on the vastly superior Commodore 64 and Amstrad versions, but still, the novel ways the game was marketed back in the day make it worth remembering, even if the gameplay itself was utterly forgettable. If you enjoyed this little look at a long-lost Friday the 13th game, do give this video a like and subscribe for more from Eurogamer. I'm hoping to put up a new episode of Games You Never Knew Existed once every 2 weeks, but if you can't wait for that, why not check out the episodes on screen right now, where I talk about the Shadow of Mordor game you never knew existed, the Destiny game you never knew existed, and the Star Fox games you never knew existed. Thanks for watching, and have a lovely day.
Bye!